Service. Welcome back to the Full Service Podcast. I am Tank Smith, your host. Today, episode 107. So happy that you're here. Hope your Thanksgiving was a good one. Hope it was wonderful. I ate too much, and I'm afraid of a scale. So that's where I'm at. But hope you're good. Also, happy Hanukkah to the people out there. What's up? I saw on Twitter Hanukkah started yesterday, so I went to my roommate. I was excited. I was like, "Bro, happy Hanukkah." He's like, "It does not start for a few hours," but I appreciate the sentiment. I felt good. I felt good about it. But hope y'all are good. Thanks for being here. As always, we're on Instagram. We're on Twitter at Full Service Pod. I am at Tank Funkadelic. If you enjoy the show, make sure you are subscribed on whatever platform you're joining us on. Hit that like button, that follow button, that heart, that plus, that subscribe. You'll be alerted as soon as those new episodes drop. Ratings and reviews help so much for visibility for the show, so if you can, hit us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. Write us a review. I'll read it on air. It's my favorite thing ever. If you want to support the show, the best way to do that is by joining us on Patreon. Each month we have at least one Patreon exclusive episode. We actually had like 5 people join Patreon this past month. Shout out to them. Oh my God, amazing. So if you want to do that, patreon.com/fullservicepod. Today, episode 107. So excited, so excited. My guest is Melbourne, Australia-based sex worker, writer, sex educator, activist, podcaster. Georgie Wolfe is on the podcast. I actually did her podcast, The Satisfaction Project, in September, and when you recorded that, I was like, I gotta get her on the pod. So she's here. So stoked to have her on. We talk life after lockdown. I don't know if a lot of you guys know, you're in the U.S. Australia, they've been locked down hard. They actually just got out of lockdown in like October. So we talk getting out of that, what she's been up to for the past year, what sex work looks like after lockdown. We talk her podcast, The Satisfaction Project. We talk the importance of boundaries, consent. We talk working in a brothel, working independently. Why sometimes you just gotta sing Nickelback during a threesome. Sometimes it happens, and it's wonderful. Shout out, Georgie. I appreciate you coming on the podcast. Such a good time. Guaranteed, y'all are going to love this episode. You can find Georgie on Twitter at Georgie Wolfe. You can find The Satisfaction Project wherever you find podcasts. The website, satisfactionproject.com. And you can find The Satisfaction Project on Twitter at allaboutescorts. I'll have links to all of those in the show notes. Click the links, do the things. Give her a follow, listen to the podcast. I'm going to stop talking. I hope you enjoy my conversation today with Georgie Wolfe. Thanks. Welcome back, listeners. It's Tank Smith. I'm so fucking excited for today's episode. My guest is Melbourne-based sex worker, writer, podcaster, sex educator, activist, Georgie Wolfe. Georgie, thanks for being on the podcast.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Super excited to have another chat with you.
This is great. I did your podcast, I think, like in September. Now you're back on this podcast. Fucking, this is great. Hell yeah.
What goes around comes around. You scratch my back and I'll scratch yours.
Hell yes.
Right.
Listeners, I am currently in Atlanta. Georgie, where are you joining the people from? Where are you joining us from?
I'm in Melbourne and it is 8 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday. So these are the sacrifices I make so I can yarn with people about sex work. I will get up at 7 a.m. on a weekend.
This is amazing. I appreciate you getting up early. You know, we had Thanksgiving yesterday, so I feel like I'm recovering today. It's like the afternoon. So I appreciate you getting up early for the podcast.
Well, I appreciate you working over Thanksgiving. This is peak holiday season now, isn't it? Like, you should all be relaxing, really.
Yeah, today's Black Friday. I haven't done any shopping, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to get out there. I'm going to go to the gas station and see if I can get some chips for cheap prices. I don't know.
Oh, we get all the Black Friday sales here too. I should buy myself a new frock or something. Like, you know, we get all the same discounts.
Oh, nice. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want like for Christmas this year? Is that happening? Is there a gift or
Mhm.
like end of the year? What do you want for a gift?
You know what I really want for Christmas? Because we've been in lockdown in Melbourne for much of this year due to the pandemic. I would really like to get laid. Just putting that out into the universe.
People, Georgie has spoken into existence. It's laid. It's got to
Right?
happen.
Manifest it, right? I want to get laid. Someone solve this problem for me. I'm sure there are people out there who can solve this problem for me.
There are definitely people out there that can solve this problem for you.
It's really hard. It's hard doing like a whole year of being stuck inside, right?
That's crazy. That's one of the things I kind of wanted to find out because I know, like, I think it was like it's been like a little over a month since like lockdown has kind of ended. How's that
Mm.
been? How's that been getting out?
Super weird. I had my first social dinner date a couple of weeks ago, and it's like I'd forgotten how to hooker. If you'll excuse me using the word, please don't use the word hooker. I'm allowed to use the word hooker because I'm a sex worker, but I'd kind of forgotten how to do it. So I'm like, oh, what do I wear? And how much makeup do I put on? And should I wear the really big heels or the small heels? And I went all out. I wore the really tight pants and I wore the really big heels, and then I turned up and it was this tiny little, really casual Mexican restaurant that my friend had picked, and it was beautiful, but I just hadn't checked. So I turned up in like full glam, and I could barely walk in these giant heels. And then I drank half a jug of sangria with my best mate, who's also a worker. And then I couldn't walk away because I was too drunk to walk away on my giant heels. So I think I've got
Uh,
some work to do.
that's great. I feel like that's how, as soon as people came out of quarantine, they didn't really know. Like, people were tongue kissing strangers in the streets, just going all out, full parties. Like,
I'm the opposite. I have social anxiety, so I'm a bit like, "Oh my god, I have to speak to people now. How do I do that?" And just trying to, relearn how to get out into society and be a functioning member of society is totally a problem.
it is kind of crazy. I mean, I feel like I did have a little anxiety, like just like when you've been inside for a long time and then you're going outside and then potentially anybody could be like infect you with this thing that
Yeah.
everyone's telling you is the worst thing ever. It is like a lot of like, oh fuck, is this okay? Like what we're doing right now? It is
It's
kind of
scary
got to
stuff.
relearn.
And like total props to you, by the way, because I'm aware that the situation in the USA has been somewhat more dire than here in Australia. We had much lower case numbers. Although, yeah, we've lost people and it absolutely sucks. But I understand that maybe the fear and anxiety and stuff might be a bit more intense for you folks.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's a wild world we live in. This is a crazy
Oof,
time.
what a time to be alive.
Yeah. I know at least like it's cold here. You know, it's winter almost. Winter's like coming up in a month. I know you guys are exact opposite. You guys summer's about to start popping off. You got any plans for
Hmm.
the summer? What's happening?
Oh my God. I had a work meeting yesterday and the sun was out on my balcony, and I went and put my computer so that people could see my face. And then I took my pants off and lay in the sun and got a bit of a tan, and it was so nice. So we're getting that
Nice.
weather coming in now, getting to get outside again. Looking forward to that.
What's something to do in is it Melbourne? What's something good to do like if say
So, Melbourne,
somebody's
mate.
coming. Okay, Melbourne. Okay,
A
okay,
fucking
hell yeah.
oath. So visitors to Melbourne, I mean, like if you're into the Thanksgiving eating, I would recommend the eating here. All the eating in Melbourne is good. The food in Melbourne is so good that when you travel to other places, you're kind of like, oh, why did I come here? The food's not as good. I should just go home and order a steak. And then everyone thinks you're an insufferable wanker because everywhere you go, you're just like, oh yeah, this restaurant's fine, but so that's my recommendation. Come to Melbourne, go to a really good restaurant. Um,
Okay.
like try some of the food. I can't speak to the night spots because pandemic. I haven't been out in like a year. It's a bit sad.
That's wild. How have you been able to stay motivated? Because I feel like every time like I see your name at like on Twitter, new articles are coming out, new episodes of your podcast. How are you staying motivated in this time when it's like just a wild time?
I like a good project. I think keeping busy distracts me from things. So mid pandemic, I was suddenly like, maybe I'll start another business. That would be a fun thing to do mid-pandemic. Let's start another website. So that was why the Satisfaction project happened, because I decided to start another business in addition to the ones I was already running and doing sex work, um, so that I'm busy enough that I'm not worrying about what's going
Okay.
on.
Tell the people a little bit about the Satisfaction Project. I was on episode number 2. What is the Satisfaction
Mm.
Project? When did you start it? What are some goals? Yeah.
Yeah. So such a good chat. Thanks for coming on and helping me get that podcast started. So basically, the Satisfaction Project is a website and a membership program for clients who see hands-on sex workers who want to get the info, want to feel confident, like want to kind of, just really get the skills they need to have really, really good sex. Because I feel like we just don't really talk about that much. Like clients have to kind of figure it out on their own. And if you want to see a sex worker, you kind of need to work it out and try and work out the right things to say and do. And no one's really going to help you. Like you can't just ask your mates, right?
Yeah, no.
So,
There's so many times like when I started this, I had no idea anybody who had seen a sex worker. So I'm like, I
mhm.
am looking on the internet. I have no idea what the hell I'm doing. You know?
And you don't know talking to your friends. Some of them could be really like, whorephobic or sex negative, and they might just slap you. Like it's a really hard thing to bring up to go, hey, I think maybe I'd like to see a sex worker that might be good for me. So I started writing a lot of articles around that, why sex work is a really good option for a lot of people and how to contact an escort for the first time, things like that. And also things like I've spoken with a lot of clients who get really emotionally attached to their workers and didn't know how to handle it. And again, this is stuff we just don't teach people. Like, we don't teach people emotional skills for managing those feelings. And things can get real dramatic if you don't know how to handle your feelings when you're seeing a sex worker in the long term. So, try to
Yeah.
help people out with that stuff.
That's awesome. Yeah, people. Where can the people find your podcast, The Satisfaction
Oh,
Project?
yeah. The website is satisfactionproject.com. And I'm on Twitter as well. Currently, the handle is at All About Escorts, although I probably need to fix that because it's not just all about escorts, it's about sex workers in general.
Okay. Oh yeah, people. All about escorts, The Satisfaction Project. Subscribe to the podcast. Listen to the podcast. What are you doing?
We've got some quality guests on the podcast, including you. It was a great chat.
Hey, including me, episode number 2. Check it out.
Mm.
What's something you're passionate about? I know a lot of like this year's been like I feel like you've had a lot of time to kind of like think like or really like delve into like what do you want to do? You know, what's something you found maybe you're passionate about?
So many things. And I'm into so many things and it's so tiring. I love writing. I love working out. I used to be a fitness instructor, so I'm really into lifting and running, which I'm going to do after we've finished this recording. During the pandemic, I started as a mental health kind of self care. I started illustrating people's cats. So
Nice.
people would post pictures of their cats on social media, and I'd take the photo and then turn their cat into an 8-bit illustration, and that was really fun.
That's amazing.
I also bought a piano during mid the first pandemic, 2020, and tried to learn to play that, which was hilarious.
Did you how's that going?
Oh, I can play one thing poorly. That's
Okay.
okay. It's not about being good, it's just about having a go. And this applies to everything, right? Like it's just fun to have a go at stuff. Like why not? Why not try everything?
I feel like you really got to try everything to find out like there might be something that you want to do but you don't even know. And then you try it and you're like,
Mhm.
"Oh my god, this is my thing. I found it," you know?
Right. Or maybe you try something and you're shit at it, but it kind of still brought a bit of joy into your life, and that's great.
Yeah. Hell yeah. I feel like too, because every people follow her on Twitter, but I feel like I see you talking a lot about PlayStation happening. It's everyone's playing PlayStation during the pandemic.
Right.
What's the go to game?
Okay, so PlayStation just saved my ass during the pandemic. It stopped me from going completely insane, and I'm a little bit embarrassed, but I actually am really into GTA Online. Um,
Nice.
and so I basically just spend a lot of time playing. Oh no, that does sound bad. If I'd say I spend my time playing with 14-year-olds, you know what I mean? I'm not being
Yeah,
gross.
you know
Everyone in GTA Online is a shitty, sexist, racist
they're child.
14-year-old. That's a generalization. Don't sue me. Um,
They're not just racist in the U.S. They're also racist in Australia as well.
I mean, not everyone, and I'm sure there are some people on there that are not 14, but certainly there's some pretty offensive stuff. So I try not to interact with too many people because they just keep on blowing me up and then calling me names. But it's been
That's
good.
how it is.
That's GTA Online, people blowing you up and abusing you, basically.
That's really all. Yeah.
Again, don't sue me. I'm sure that's not everyone's experience.
People, don't sue Georgie. Don't do that.
Please. I'm too busy for that shit.
Too busy.
But no, it's been really good. And it has saved my mental health, just having something to concentrate on and something to escape to if I was like having a bad day.
Yeah. I feel like I love video. I mean, video games really. It's like takes you. You're out of Europe. You're not where you're at. You're in this
Out of your
game. It's
head. What do you
yeah.
play?
I feel like I play a lot of FIFA, Madden. Then I
Mm.
play. I have Xbox, so I'm still like play
Oh,
like
we can't be
old school
friends.
Halo. I know, right?
Oh, really? Oh, that'd be
Yeah,
fun.
I'm still a Halo fan. I played a lot.
I like stuff that isn't necessarily about blowing things up. I mean, I know I do enjoy blowing things up because I play GTA Online, but sports games are fun. Um, like race games are fun. You're not necessarily killing people.
Yeah,
Like, yeah, that's cool.
yeah. They're not all rated MA. There's some rated teens that are also fun as well.
Right.
So I feel like at the beginning, like I always try to start, and everyone's kind of like beginning of their sex work career, right? Their sex work journey. Do you feel like you
Mm.
can remember your first exposure to sex work at all?
Oh my God. I have such a story for this if you want to hear it.
I want to hear it.
So, the first time I ever heard about sex work was when my nana went on holidays, and she went on holidays to Perth. And Perth is a bit of a city that's really a country town. It's on the other side of Australia. It's quite hot. There's a lot of deserty stuff going on. And she went to a tiny little town called Karratha in Perth, which is where Australia's oldest brothel is.
Oh wow,
And they do tours of this brothel. And so, because she was an amazing woman, my nana, she did a tour of Karratha brothel, and then she came back and told the whole family about it. And I was like 10 at the time. She's like, I met all these ladies, and they were actually there working, saving up to pay for their weddings. And I was like, oh, that's a thing. That's a thing people do. Fuck.
that's
Uh,
amazing.
and I haven't actually mentioned this to my family. Like, hey, so it was Nana that sort of gave me the idea of getting into sex work. But it was just lovely. She was so curious.
When you heard her, like when you first heard that, was there any like what are you thinking? I guess at that time.
I think I was thinking, cool, that's very enterprising of them. Like, I'm not into the wedding stuff, but sure, like as if you wouldn't just pop up to
Yeah,
Karratha and work for a few months and make a packet. Like, that sounds like a good kind of business proposition.
yeah,
Yeah. And no one was like, oh, God, how horrible. So I didn't get those negative vibes.
yeah. How did you end up getting into sex work? What was your path like into sex work?
I've done a lot of different jobs, and I moved to Melbourne from Sydney about 12 years ago. Um, just, I really needed a change of scenery. I was pretty depressed. I was working a really shitty job that I wasn't enjoying. So I came down to Melbourne. I was living in a backpackers. I was just steadily eating all my money. Um, I was a bit like, oh my God. And the problem with moving cities is no one wants to give you a job because they're afraid you're going to move back and
Oh
bail.
yeah,
So I applied for a lot of jobs in the other fields I work in. I'm a photographer and graphic designer as well. And nobody wanted to give me a fucking job. And I was getting really desperate. I was like starting to run out of money. And then I ran into an old friend of mine that I hadn't seen in literally like 10 years. And they said, oh, why don't you just go do some brothel shifts? And I went, oh, is it that simple? And they went, yeah, it really is. Like, find the nearest brothel to where you're staying, call them up, go, hey, go in, give it a go. Like, you can always just not do it again if you don't like it. And I went, oh,
yeah.
I just never considered. And so I called up the nearest brothel, and they were like, oh, okay, come in for an interview. And what I didn't realize at the time is that a brothel interview is them showing you where the lockers are. I thought it was full interview. I actually put
Oh
a collared shirt on. I actually got dressed up. Like, I put a collared shirt on and some nice slacks. And then I turned up to this interview expecting for them to say, so what's your experience and why do you want to do this job? Standard job interview questions. But no, they went, here are the lockers, here are the bathrooms, and here's where you sit. So then I got started.
How are you like? So going into that, are you like? Do you know anything about that brothel world at all? Like, because I know in Australia where sex work is legal, they do have brothels. Are you
Mm.
kind of aware of that? I guess world at all? Or are you kind of going into it like, hey, I just need to make money. And I'm going to do this.
Yeah, so brothels are kind of illegal, allowed in some states of Australia and not in others. Same as independent sex work is allowed in some states of Australia and not in others under certain circumstances. It's super complicated. It's very patchy. But yeah, in Sydney where I grew up, brothels were a thing. And in fact, I'd actually taken one of my partners to a brothel previously because I wanted to have a threesome. And I decided it was better to pay for the threesome than to try and, convince some random woman
Yeah,
to have a threesome because that's just obnoxious, right?
that is the
Um,
best idea. Threesome sex worker.
right.
That's the way to go.
It was a little more dramatic than I'd hoped. So I accidentally took my partner to the most expensive brothel in Sydney. And as soon as we walked in, a busload of footballers arrived. So we were sitting there, and these footballers walk in, literally 10 of them, and they're looking at me, and I'm looking at them, and they were like, "What are you doing here?" But then we met this amazing woman and had this really amazing threesome, and she was really cool. She was really cool, this worker, and just lovely. And it was a lovely introduction to meeting a sex worker and what they could be like and what that service could be like. So I think I was pretty impressed with and I knew what was possible at that
Okay,
stage. When I started work, I'm like, okay, like I know the kind of experience that can happen if you meet a good worker, and I'd like to be that worker.
that's awesome.
It was really helpful to have that experience.
How did you like working at the brothel? What was
It
your
was really
experience there?
cool. It's not open anymore. It was a tiny little, female-run brothel run by these 2 ladies, and they were really nice, and the people who worked there were also really nice and gave me a lot of tips and helped me out because I was new, and then the owners sort of gave me the experienced clients that they knew were friendly, so I got to start off with some clients who knew the ropes and were willing to sort of ease me into it. Met some really nice people that used to come to that. It was a good way to start. I think if I'd gone straight into independent work, I would have struggled a bit to find my feet. It was really nice to have that peer support.
Okay. I feel like I ask everybody too, like, was there kind of like a learning curve or like a waiver period at the beginning when you're like not good or maybe inexperienced to where you're like
Hmm.
just that
Yeah.
that initial learning curve? How's that?
I find because I'd already been shagging like a motherfucker for most of my life. So that wasn't an issue. But the biggest thing for me, I think, is boundaries. So, I meet a lot of people who have never learned how to ask for what they want or how to set a boundary or respect a boundary. And that's not to say they're bad people. It's just we don't learn this stuff. Like we don't learn how to ask for what we want in the bedroom. We don't learn how to check in and go, hey, are you okay with this? How are you feeling right now? What do you
Yeah.
want? And so I had to get very good at really, really setting boundaries around what I wouldn't do and making it very clear to clients because they don't know how to ask and then they just try and guess and then sometimes they get it wrong. Or
Yeah.
sometimes if a client wanted something and was being a bit pushy, I had to get really good at saying no. And like that's a skill that takes a bit of learning. So I think that's the big one for me, just learning how to set boundaries and stick to my own boundaries.
Yeah, and I feel like I was listening. You were talking to somebody just about like just in terms of like talking boundaries, and a lot of people take directions in sex from porn, and
Mm,
in porn there's no talking. They're not talking
right?
about, hey, is this okay? Do you like this? Is this? But because that conversation's happened before, before the scene is filmed, and
Mm-hmm.
so people might not understand like, oh, hey, we can like have this conversation about is this cool? Is like yes and no in during sex
Mm,
and and necessarily
right.
not necessarily learning that because you're only taking direction from thing is just when you see it as singular kind of like it is in porn.
I'm almost leaning towards these days that consent like it's not like a negotiation you have beforehand, although I know some people do in-depth negotiations beforehand, especially if you're getting up to kinky stuff and stuff like that. But it's almost like this is a thing that is best done continuously during. And I wish we could see that in porn. Like I wish we could see porn scenes where the people in it are like, oh my God, this is so hot. How are you feeling right now? I love it when you do that right now. Do that to me, like, oh, how about this? How is this working for you? Should I go harder? Should I go slower? Um, I'd want to see that dialogue because it is really hot when you're communicating with your partner and looking them in the eyes and watching them and observing and feeding back to them. Like that is really sexy. Like I wish we saw more of that.
Yeah, definitely, especially too because it's like, okay, I know that you like this thing and this is cool. I'm like, that feels good to me because I'm like, I know that you are, this is cool with you. That's
Right. And people change too. It's like, yeah, this is good, this is good, this is good. Oh, not too much now. We need to do something else. And, it's good to just be talking continuously so you can just switch at the right moment into the next hot thing. Like, that's a fucking good skill to have in the bedroom.
Yeah, and it's crazy too. Like, maybe in like, so I moved. I'm in Atlanta now, but I moved from North Carolina, a couple states up, in 2019, and I
Mm.
think in 2019 or 2020 they just put a law that you could basically like just now like revoke consent once you give consent during sex.
Which blows my mind, because the idea that consent is something that you say yes to and then you've signed on the dotted line, you can't take it back, is like, I don't think that's right. Like, consent is like, hey, how's this? Yeah, this is great. Can we do this? Yeah, we can do this. Oh, how's that feeling? Oh, a little bit to the left. Like, that's consent. It's not, yes, I consent to the sex, you know.
Yeah,
But we don't learn this stuff. So if this isn't a way that your listeners do sex, like, no shade on those folks, because no one teaches us this shit at all.
yeah. So you work in a brothel, right? How is it, and you go independent? How does that compare working in a brothel versus independently? How's that?
I mean, everyone's going to be different, right? So everyone has a different ways that they prefer to work, and some people are happy doing brothel work and not having to manage their own admin and stuff like that, and being able to hang out with people, having a bit of peer support. I prefer to work on my own. I prefer taking the whole fee. Thanks very much. I prefer to do my own admin and screen my own clients. And I still have very good peer support from the people around me. We have a good little community and we do help each other. But it is a lot. It is a lot, and it gets stressful. You can't just turn up to work and do your job and go home. There is a lot of answering of emails. There's a lot of social media, getting your photos done, paying for your own ads. And I'd understand why some people wouldn't be up for that. But yeah, like, I'm totally down for that stuff. And I love being able to really get to know my clients before I meet them, because it gives me a much better idea of whether we're going to get along, rather than just kind of wandering in off the street.
Yeah. Have you worked in Sydney as well, or is it mainly in like Melbourne?
Mm. Yeah, yeah. I used to travel because my folks are in Sydney, so sometimes I go up there, and there's a place that I have worked at when I'm visiting, not for quite some time. But yeah, like, it's pretty cool because the actual brothel that I work at in Sydney, or worked at, is part of my old stomping ground that I used to live
Nice.
in Sydney. So going up and kind of hanging out in the old hood, and then just like getting laid and making some money. Yeah, it's been nice.
How do the two cities compare in terms of the different like sex work scenes in each city?
I don't know. I feel like I haven't worked enough in Sydney to know for sure the difference. I love Melbourne, and the people I've met in Melbourne are just lovely. But I've also had some clients from Sydney who are really cool and interesting as well. Um, in New South Wales, which is where Sydney is, sex work is more currently a bit more decriminalized than in Victoria. So, say you can kind of work out of your hotel in Sydney without worrying that the cops are going to get called. But in currently in Victoria, it is technically illegal to work out of your own home or premises. And
Oh
that might
wow.
change soon. They're trying to put some new laws through that might help that, but it's kind of annoying. So it's nice to be able to go to Sydney and just get a bloody hotel room and have your clients turn up and not have to worry.
Yeah. So I know like a lot of people that listen to this podcast, they're in the US, and basically in the US, aside from, Nevada, full service sex work is pretty much, illegal. And
Mm.
Australia, like you kind of mentioned, it kind of varies region to region, but for the most part, it's legal throughout Australia. Am I correct in that?
I'm not the ultimate expert on this stuff because it gets kind of complicated. But basically, there's a few different ways um, countries or regions can manage um, legal stuff around sex work, and they can either ban it outright completely, or they can have certain regulations. And this is sometimes called the, like, licensing model, stuff like that.
Okay.
And then there's full decriminalization, which where there are no specific laws about sex work, and sex workers are just stick to the same rules and regulations as any other type of business. And then each state has a slightly different combination of all those things, which is super confusing, and pretty bad. Like, some of the laws are pretty bad. Although I'm just really aware that, yeah, the US is also actually pretty bad. And I've talked to some workers in the US about what it's like trying to work under that regime, and it's really fucking hard. So, like, just want to shout out to those folks, like, doing an amazing job under really difficult conditions. Criminalization is fucking awful to work under.
Yeah. What's the relationship like with, I guess, like law enforcement and sex workers in Australia?
So again, it would vary depending on the person, and I can only speak from my personal experience. like, yeah, like we have some things at the moment under the current laws that are illegal, which means that, if I'm working out of my apartment, the cops could get involved. If I say the wrong thing in my advertising, I can be fined. And none of that inspires confidence. Like, obviously, you're very unlikely to go to the cops to report something if you think that they might then decide to investigate you for
Yeah.
something that you've done wrong. So, and I imagine this is a similar situation to the US, right? That, of course, if I have a issue with someone, whether it's at work or whether it's just a partner or a friend that's gotten out of line, I'm going to hesitate before I go to the cops because I'm afraid that they might not treat me like a human being because I'm a sex worker. And that'll
Yeah.
that'll get better, I hope, if we can get full decriminalisation. But also, as attitudes need to change too. Like, um, you know, it needs to be treated like any other business, in my
Yeah.
opinion. This is
Yeah.
just my experience, and there'll be people out there that have had really shitty experiences with the cops, and certainly people from like marginalised backgrounds and stuff who are targeted more than I would be because I'm fairly kind of white passing. So there's a lot of factors that play into your experience you have with the cops, and I know for some people it's not great.
Yeah. I know, like during the pandemic, definitely online sex work has picked up a lot. OnlyFans pretty much blew up, kind of in 2020. Have a lot of people in Australia. I feel like I know it's like not necessarily trying to like, oh, you're an Australian, so how about you speak for everyone in Australia? But do you feel like online sex work, like OnlyFans, is kind of picked up as there as well? Have a lot of people adopted that?
Look, I'm not sure across the whole industry, but certainly I did a podcast with one of my mates, Jenna Love, last year. It was for my other podcast for the Art of the Hookup, which is about hooking up ethically and online dating. But she talked about online sex work and how to hook up with sex workers online. So the etiquette for contacting someone, if you want to kind of do some flirty phone chat or do some camming or maybe swap some nude selfies or whatever. And that's something that she does quite a lot. So I know that it's picked up for her. I know that she's done a lot of work. It's kind of cool. She does like virtual girlfriend packages, like where she'll
Oh,
literally
nice.
text someone throughout the day, going, "Honey, how you doing? Hope you're having a great day." Like stuff like that. It's really lovely.
See, I feel like people need that, just a good
Yeah.
text. You're like, oh shit, somebody's thinking about
I
me.
kind of felt like I needed that in the mid-pandemic. I wanted someone to text me and go, "Hey, honey, thinking of you," like that kind of stuff.
Just a sweet text, just to let you know that, hey, I
Right.
think you're nice.
And and also, here's my boob.
And also, here's my boob. That's, yeah,
Yeah.
that's the follow up.
Mhm.
Just really
Just
the icing on top.
just to show I care. Here's also
Just
a
to show
naked
you.
picture of me as well.
Yeah, need to do that,
It's
man.
lovely.
How have, like, October's kind of like when the lockdowns lifted. How have sex workers been affected in Melbourne?
I mean, again, I can only talk for myself, but I know it's been hard, and I'm lucky enough that I did have other bits of income coming in from the other kinds of work that I do, so I kind of got through lockdown okay. But a lot of people didn't. A lot of people really had trouble paying the rent. Super stressful. Like they say that sex work is the oldest profession, and it's the kind of job that you assume will always be around. You can always go back to. Like I always thought of sex work as my fallback career, but now we've learned that there's a time that things could happen. There could be circumstances where we can't actually do sex work, and that was a bit of a shock.
That's just great. Like, are they paying people to stay inside? Like, because if you can't go outside and you like, are they paying people? Like, I guess the government is paying people to be able to like afford things
Mm.
still.
Yeah, we had a couple of assistance programs where people who were running businesses got money, or if you were an employee, if under certain circumstances, you could get some money. But some sex workers didn't meet those requirements, and then it didn't apply to people who were here on visas or
Oh wow.
weren't full residents, things like that. So a lot of people fell through the cracks, I think. And again, I'm not a super expert in this, but like some people qualified for the payments, some people didn't, and the ones that didn't were really just like left behind, and it was really hard.
Yeah. Do you know if they close like brothels and stuff? Or those all like
hmm I mean, again, depending on the state. So Melbourne, we had some pretty full-on lockdowns, and they did close brothels. I think they closed them in Sydney during the lockdowns there. Not sure about the other states because I haven't been keeping up. But yeah, like
Okay.
during the lockdown periods, yep, no brothels, no strip clubs. Very sad.
Oh boy, that is rough. When they opened
right?
in Atlanta, everything everywhere was just so crowded. It was amazing.
It must have been hard. Did you find it hard during the worst bits, where a lot of people maybe weren't working in terms of like, getting laid is kind of like a human need and hanging out with the people you care about. Was that difficult? Did you find that you went without for a while or that you couldn't see the people that you wanted to see?
I mean, it was rough, definitely not being able to see people. But I feel like I got lucky. I started dating somebody like right around like May
Oh,
of last year,
fantastic.
and then we pretty much kind of rode that whole like pandemic out, and that was nice, having that other person.
Perfect
But definitely,
timing.
if yeah, it was nice. I feel like if I didn't do that, it would have been fucking rough. Like I don't really know if it was just me
Mm.
stuck in my room for like an extended period of time. Like the beginning of the pandemic for me, I was just fucking drinking Pinot Grigio all day and playing Skyrim for a couple months,
Yeah.
and that shit was fucking rough.
Oh,
Luckily too, I had this podcast, to keep me kind of sane. I'm like, well, every Tuesday I got to put an episode out, so I got to get my fucking
mm,
shit together, start emailing people and
right.
recording. But if
Deadlines are
I
useful.
they definitely are. They definitely were like, I got to keep my head down. I got to do this thing for the people. But if I didn't have that, now if I'm like completely alone, who knows? It would have been terrible.
Oh, fucking rough, man. I got to ask too. Because I'm curious. Like, it's really cool that you were dating someone that knows that you see or have seen sex workers, and run a podcast about the topic. That's really neat.
Yeah, no, she's a sex worker too, so that was
Legend.
cool. Yeah,
Love it.
and like all my mom, she texted me today before this interview. She was like, "Hey, have a fruitful interview. Hope it goes well." And I was like, "Oh, mom, so sweet."
That's so good. My mum listens to my podcast sometimes, which is just horrifically disturbing given some of the shit that I say. And I don't know how to self censor. So I've just gone, well, if you hear anything terrible, I'm not responsible. But it's still
I know,
it's
right?
really
It's like,
nice she
hey,
cares.
you know what's coming, so just get ready. Just you might hear some shit.
Sorry, mate, we're going to talk about gangbangs again. I'm sorry it keeps coming up. Yeah. What can you do? It's like at some point, parents have to find out that you're into weird shit. And my poor parents have been finding out I'm into weird shit my entire life. So I feel like they're pretty good at it now.
That's nice. Hell yeah. So, aside from being like, a sex worker, you're an activist as well for sex workers. How did you get into activism?
It's really hard, and this happens. Everyone I've talked to that I've called an activist has said the same thing. So I feel really pretty bad saying this, but I just don't feel because I don't feel like I represent sex workers. I don't feel sometimes I don't even feel like I'm really doing anything particularly useful. I'm just like, no, man, I'm just having a rant about the shit that's pissing me off and that affects me personally. And then other people occasionally are like, oh, actually, that really resonated with me, or thanks for saying that. And that's a really good, like, I'm glad that it's hitting the right spot. But at the end of the day, like, we all have so many different experiences. I'm really nervous about trying to say what I think is good for other people because I just
Yeah.
don't want to get it wrong. Like, it's pretty dicey.
I feel like too, like when you say something and you're like, "Hey, I'm just speaking for me," but then like all these people are like, "Oh wow, she's speaking for all these people," like just like them putting that on you.
Yeah, they
I feel
do
like I'd feel like a little bit of that imposter. Like, who am I to fucking, I'm just
say
me
things.
saying these things, and then and now I'm somehow a voice for other people.
It's kind of
What?
like being the only gay in the village. Like, if someone has only met one sex worker, they'll assume that every sex worker is like that one that they've met. It's the same as what they say about people with autism. Like, if you've met one person with autism, you've only met one person and everyone's different. Same with people with disability. Like, but people will assume, like, if they've only met one person of that particular group, they'll just assume that everyone else is exactly the same.
Yeah.
And that's a real danger.
I feel like I definitely take that on as a black dude because I'm like, hey, we're different. We're not all the same. So it's
Oh
weird
my
how
god.
people put that
Oh
shit on you.
yeah. Fuck, that's whole discussion there too, right? And
Yeah.
you can see when people are doing it. Do you find when you say or do something and you can see their little brains going, "Oh, this is what black people do," and you're like, "Stop that."
And luckily, I feel like it happens like definitely less in Atlanta because Atlanta is like real mixed. But definitely more so in like North Carolina it'd be I feel like, oh, my experience that you're having with me right now is like maybe like a rare experience that you've had with a black person.
Oh,
um
it's a lot to put
it's
on
just
you.
interesting. Yeah.
It's a lot to put on you, and I think the same applies to sex work. Like I love talking to people about this stuff, but then yeah, don't put on me that I speak for everyone because I just don't. And I like tons of people have had heaps of experiences I haven't and can talk about it better. Like we really need those other people too. We need diversity of stories to really
It's
get
really
what it's
just
all about.
I feel it's really any minority kind of group. When they do something, it gets put on the whole group. But when the majority group, one person from the majority group does something, they're like, oh, they're just an individual. They're not, they don't represent us.
Ah.
You know.
There was something someone said online once around this, like, "Oh, when I look in the mirror, I don't see a white man, I just see a man."
Yeah.
And it's that kind of like, I don't see it. It's only the thing that stands out as different are the things that we point at, and what's different depends on where you're standing. So when we kind of see like white, straight, etc. as the default. And
Yeah.
everything else is different. Yeah, you're right. It's super interesting.
Yeah. It's. I mean, yeah. God damn. This
Politics.
world. This world's wild.
It is, and until you start talking to people, I actually had a really cool discussion. Again, I drank too much, and I went to my favorite cafe to recover. And these two old blokes, this was last weekend, were sitting talking about their cousin who had just come out as trans, and
Okay.
they were uncomfortable, and they were misgendering her, and they were like, just they were having struggling, right? And so
Yeah.
I sort of went, "Hey guys, I'm going to cut in on your conversation here. Like, let's I'm let's have a conversation around this shit because like a lot of my friends are trans too, and it's okay." And they were like, "Oh," and I
I think
just
that it's always nice when you can kind of have that space and allow people to also be like themselves too when they're trying to have that conversation, because a lot of
right.
times like they're ignorant and they're like they don't really know what's up. They never met another trans person, so they might say some shit in ignorance, not really getting it, but not allowing that space for that conversations to where it's like, oh, they
Mm,
said some ignorant shit, you're fucking done. Can't we still
straight
have
to
this
the
space where we can talk about this shit rather than, you said this, you're wrong, I believe this, I know I'm right. That space, like you entering into that conversation, trying to have that with them, I feel like is a fucking, it's a great thing, just
I
because
I
people
feel
need to
this way
learn.
about sex work. I feel like sometimes when I tell people I'm a sex worker, their brains just kind of shut down and they're like, "Oh, I'm so uncomfortable right now." And for me, the right thing isn't to shame them for feeling uncomfortable because the reason they feel uncomfortable is because of all the crappy sex negative stuff that they've been taught or their trauma or whatever. So to not shut someone down because they're struggling, but to say, "Hey, yeah, I know it feels pretty confronting that I've told you I'm a sex worker and like maybe that's going to bring up some shit for you. I understand. I'm going to give you a minute to process that because it's okay. It's okay to feel uncomfortable,
Yeah,
and understandable. Yeah,
yeah,
giving people a bit of a space to come to a better feeling around it, and then often they do if they're given that space. Not always, but often, in my
yeah.
experience.
There has to be that space, or else we can never come to this understanding. If people, the space is one of the most important things. We got to
The
have it,
time.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Not everyone, obviously, not everyone wants to learn and wants to be open minded, but a lot of people are. They just struggle because they've been told that sex is so bad. And they need time. They just need time to process. Sometimes they need a lot of time. And then I circle back and they're like, oh, yeah, it's fine now.
yeah. Hell yeah. How'd that conversation turn out? Did you
Mm.
how'd that play out?
It was really nice. We just had a bit of a chat about my experiences around trans stuff and just, like that sometimes it's uncomfortable to get your head around when, someone you thought was one way, whether it's gender or whatever you think about them, suddenly things are different. That it can feel confronting and that's okay and give yourself time to come around to the new way of seeing like and they were like, "Oh yeah." And then one of the blokes got super worked up about gay rights and started talking about Alan Turing, bless him. And that was just lovely.
Oh hell yeah. That's
Yeah.
sweet. That's a sweet story.
It was lovely. And they were both just lovely old straight Aussie blokes.
Hell yeah.
Mm.
You are a sex educator as well, right?
Yes. I mean, that story probably illustrates I love to invade other people's personal conversations and go, hey, have you thought about this slightly differently?
That's always fun, especially when you can hit them with some truth bombs and they ain't ready for it.
Yeah, it's judging whether people are ready. And I run workshops in ethical hookups, so ethical casual sex. And it is
Okay.
very much a case of what are people ready for right now? Like I'm not going to tell them to go out and shag everyone in the world. That's not what it's about. It's like, hey, so what holds you back from getting laid? Like what are you nervous about? What do you feel down on yourself about? How do you feel like you might not be good enough? And then let's get over that stuff before we start trying to chat people up on dating apps or whatever.
Yeah. Because I feel like you got to be ready when you're before the whole dating app thing. You got to be ready for the dating app for the dating part.
Right?
Like I
Like
got the profile, but I'm not ready for the thing. You got to be ready
right?
mentally, or else it's
And
not
if you
going to work.
start trying to talk to people before you're ready, you'll just give off weird vibes and they'll get the weird vibes and you won't get a date or you won't get laid because they'll just be picking up on the fact that you aren't really nervous or ashamed or whatever, right?
Yeah. Because I'll start the swiping, and then I'm like, "What am I fucking doing swiping? I'm not ready. I'm not ready for this shit."
I did that. I tried to go back on Tinder about a month ago, post lockdown. I'm like, yeah, great, I can do this again. Matched with some bloke who looked very attractive because that's Tinder. Everyone looks attractive in their profile pictures. And then
Me
I'm
as
like,
well.
"Hey, how you doing? Like, how you feeling coming out of lockdown? Like, yeah, are you ready to get out there again? Tell me about your experiences." And he went, "Ha ha." That was
That's
it. I'm
it.
like, "Okay, mate, we're not going to get along."
What? Oh, man. People listen to podcasts. Y'all got to have some better follow ups than ha.
Yeah, yeah,
Jesus.
good banter game. Come on, folks. Even if it's like, "Hey, that's really interesting. Tell me more about that." Like that's my
Yeah.
fallback when I don't know what to say. "Hey, so tell me a bit more about you. Like, how you doing?" Yeah. It was pretty funny. So then I just went goodbye, and I haven't been back on since. But I'll eventually get the nerve up to go back on there again.
You got this. You got
I got
this.
this. There are people out there that can hold a good conversation,
Yeah, for sure.
right?
Just got to find them.
Yeah, yeah. Just got to dig through the haze and the EO vowels and the yeah
Do you feel
BPFs.
like do you feel like the day I mean, I guess it's you don't really know yet because it's kind of new, but just I wonder how people in the dating at post this lockdown after being inside a year, what the fuck, how's it gonna be, I wonder.
Right. I reckon we've all forgotten, and this could be a generalization, but like, maybe we are all going to be super out of practice and it's going to be super nerve wracking for everyone.
Probably for sure.
I know I'm going to say a few embarrassing things. I've just resigned myself to the fact that I'm going to put my foot in my mouth a few times. Maybe I'll have to, have a few drinks just to get through. Yeah. Before I start feeling comfortable talking to strangers again.
Yeah. It's gonna be wild. It's
Mm,
ultimately good though that we're back out there.
I'm
It'll
really
be good.
glad. Yeah. Yeah. Like it's hard. It's really hard not being around people, even if you're a quiet person. And if you're not, I know some people that have really suffered, like with no human contact. It's been really hard, like mental health stuff, all that stuff.
Yeah, one of the things I did an interview, it was last year, and it was a couple, and they work in Portland, I believe, and they were kind of talk about just like the no human interaction,
Mm,
and maybe you might live alone, and that need for people seeing sex workers just to have that fucking human touch
mm-hmm.
and fucking connection with somebody. Because if maybe you work from home this whole time, you don't have a family, you live alone,
Right.
you might get your groceries delivered, you might not see anybody at all,
Mm.
and the fact that people kind of need that just connection, and seeing sex workers throughout this time has just been like such a vital thing for a lot of people.
So much. And it's not generally always about sex. Sometimes it's just about other human beings, like, acknowledging your existence.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Really big deal.
yeah, it's just nice to fucking see somebody across from me, and we're talking.
I was a bit hysterical when I went out to this dinner date the other week. It was me and it was one of my favorite doubles partners and it was one of our favorite mutual clients. And we were all just full giggly and weird and just a bit worked up because we hadn't seen each other in literally like a year and a half, 2 years. It was amazing just to actually sit across the table from someone.
That's a great, yeah, it feels so good. It feels
So
so
good.
good.
I hope a lot of clients are having that experience now that they're, getting the thing that we haven't gotten in so long. Yeah.
I wonder if, business, like, it will just be like exponential, like, just to shoot right out of lockdown, people are like, oh my God, we got to go do this thing we haven't been able to do in forever.
Mm. I'd
I
be
wonder
curious
if,
to know whether there's a big explosion or whether it's a slow start. And I don't have the data. Like, what's your impression post well, not post pandemic because we're still in it, but post the worst bits, like where you are? Do you think that things picked up again really fast?
I mean, I think at the beginning, the people that I spoke to said it picked up pretty quick at the beginning. Like, kind of as soon as the vaccine came out, everybody was like fucking there to party.
Hmm.
Um, but I know people I spoke to, the end of the year always kind of sucks for people just because you got the holidays and people are trying to spend money on presents and all this stuff, so it kind of
Yeah,
dips. But
yeah.
I can't really,
It's
can't
hard.
speak
It's
for the
hard to
people. I
tell.
can't speak for the people. They know
Yeah,
how it is.
yeah. And then obviously family time too. Christmas is a big thing. So we might have to wait for a while to see how the numbers pan out.
Yeah, but I know that it definitely when lockdowns kind of stopped and like vaccines picked up, definitely people started coming out that weren't before. So
And hopefully new people, like maybe there'll be people that are like, "Oh my god, I just really need some touch and connection." And sex work. I think sex work is gradually becoming more and more socially acceptable, even if we have some swings back and forth. Hopefully, there's more and more people that are thinking, "Oh, maybe seeing a sex worker is a good option for me to get my needs met post pandemic." That would be really cool for people that hadn't considered it previously.
I mean, it really only makes sense too, because I feel like if you listen to this and you listen to me talk to people, you're like, what are we doing? Let's do the thing. Like it's such a man.
You need to hear it from someone. And this is why I think it's great that you're doing a podcast as a client. I think clients need to hear from other clients that that this is an okay way to get your needs met, that this can be a great way to get your needs met. I'm running a little survey at the moment. Um so I put together about 20 different questions. It's kind of like a big grand escort client customer satisfaction survey. So asking clients things like, do you feel that seeing sex workers has improved your life? Do you get nervous when you're with a worker? Do you try new things often? Stuff like that. And just asking as many people as possible all these
Okay.
questions and then kind of looking at where they land. And it's been running for about 3 days. But yeah, like people have given some interesting feedback. And one of the best things is that most of the people that have answered the survey have said, like, sex work has made my life better. Like this is something I'm glad I did. This is something that's good for me.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. How do you know how long are you running it for?
I'm going to run it at least until the end of the year. So I'll give you the link if you're interested. And I'm just
Okay,
trying to
yeah.
get as many people as possible, just from as many places as possible, just to see, like, how do clients feel about their experiences right now? Like,
Yeah, so what I'll do, I'll definitely plug it in the description for this episode, so anybody listening to this now that's a client can go and answer the survey. People, what are you doing?
that would be awesome. It's like super quick 2 minutes, but it's basically just a chance to have your say. Like, how do you feel about your experiences? Because I feel like we don't often ask clients. Clients don't get a chance to talk about this stuff. They can't talk about it with their friends most of the time. There's nowhere to really sit back and go, how has this been going for me? And I think
I
that's good
can't
information to have,
can't talk to their wives.
right?
Can't subscribe to the podcast. What are you doing? Come on.
Yeah, yeah. And this, podcast is a great way also to feel like you're kind of like kind of connecting with other clients, I guess.
Yeah, I feel
Yeah.
like I wish I would have interviewed more clients kind of throughout this too. I've only had maybe like 3 on the podcast, but I do
Mm,
think that it is kind of like a side of things that people kind of do need to see.
yeah. There's a really big stigma and it's hard to get people to talk up. I've interviewed some clients to write up in articles and things like that. And often people are very concerned about their privacy. So getting someone on the record, I imagine, with their voice would be quite hard. Have you found it hard to find people?
I haven't reached out to many. I feel like I've only and honestly too only a few people have actually reached out
Mm.
for the podcast. But I think it'd be a good thing. I feel like I saw you just interviewed Jesse Sage on your podcast.
Oh,
I
what
think
a
that came out
legend.
like I know, right? I'm like, I got to get her on the pod.
She's great.
Um, Yeah, she was writing about how in order for people to change how they feel about sex work, she feels like the clients' voices also kind of need to be out there as well.
Mm.
I do feel like you kind of do need both sides.
You you do, and just like we were talking about people making assumptions about sex workers because they've only met one, people make assumptions about clients because they've only met or heard of one. Like, oh, people with a disability see sex workers because it's the only way they can get laid, which is really incorrect, by the way. Or, people that see sex workers are just blokes that are cheating on their wives. But actually, there are so many reasons why people see sex workers, and we need to see all the reasons to understand that sex work is a really good service that addresses a lot of different stuff for people. Um,
Yeah,
like, we need that kind of diversity of why. Why do people actually, yeah,
like I remember this dude wrote into me. It's been like probably a year ago at least, and he was like, "Yo, hey, I'm like a veteran. I have my own business. I have a
oh,
divorce. I have like kids, and I don't have time with this business to be like entering into a relationship with
love it.
somebody, and so this is why I've chosen to see sex workers is because I don't have time. I don't have time to enter into a relationship with somebody. I got all this shit going on. I have kids, and this is why I do it. And you don't really hear that narrative.
Mm.
It's kind of like I have no choice but to do this.
Yeah, like it seemed like the bargain basement last option sometimes, but it's really not. It's actually just a really good service that's available if it's right for you. Like, so good to hear that story.
Yeah. Shout out to that dude. Shout out to you,
Yeah,
bro.
mate, good on you, and good on you for speaking up. And maybe we should do this more often. Like, I'd love if people wrote in and told me their whys. And maybe I'll consider doing that. Actually, I'd love to read out on my podcast, some
Oh, that'd
stories
be
from
good. Yeah.
clients. That'd be good fun. So I might put out a shout out because we need that. We need the diversity.
Yeah. How long do you see yourself in sex work?
Look, till I get bored. Um, I have a friend. Oh, I talked about Jenna Love earlier. So she actually runs a podcast called Somebody You Love, and
Okay.
she, along with her mate Holly Hart, and they just interviewed, I think, an 80-year-old worker um, who is like in the
Nice.
top 1% on OnlyFans, something like that.
Wow.
Fucking awesome podcast. Highly recommend. And that's like, yeah, man, if you can be in the top 1% of OnlyFans when you're 80, like smash those fucking stereotypes. I'd be quite happy to
Wow.
stay in the sex industry until I'm like super old.
That's incredible. World War II,
Um,
baby.
Yeah, really cool
That's
conversation.
dope.
Highly recommend. So, like,
Okay.
yeah, but I also get bored easily. So I start new businesses and I do other things, and then I learn other things and I come back. And it's nice to have that flexibility with sex work where you can just
Yeah.
leave and come back and leave and come back and all that kind of stuff.
Fuck yeah. So let's take a little trip to the future. 5 years from now,
Mm.
2026. Where
Oh,
are you? What are you doing?
Oh, this is the real manifesting time, right? What I would really like. So I'm really invested in the Satisfaction Project. I really want to build that up. I want to reach people and get that to a level where it can just be the number one resource for people who are even thinking of seeing a sex worker. That everyone will have somewhere to go to ask their questions, um, or to find answers, or to find a script for contacting a sex worker, or to, find a script for talking about consent in the bedroom. Like, I just want those resources to be available to everyone. So that's my kind of number one focus at the moment, turning that into something where people are going to go rather than going, oh shit, I think I might want to see a sex worker, but can I really do that? Is it going to be weird? How do I do that? Instead of saying all that stuff to themselves, they'll just be like, hey, I'd really like to see a sex worker. And I'm going to go to that website that shows people how to see sex workers. Then I'm going to get the info and then I'm going to get started.
Hell yeah. I mean, that sounds like
Hell
such a
yeah.
good thing because it's like when you're a client and you're new and you don't know shit, I use Google, at the beginning. I don't know what the hell I was
Mm,
doing. I use Google.
there's nothing
And,
else.
a lot of those websites that you're going to read stuff on are trash. They're
Some really shitty stuff pops up. I mean, I also pop up, by the way. But you'll get some really shitty advice or shamey advice. Yeah.
so it's good that you're, creating that so that, people that are want to learn and don't know what they're doing have that resource there. I feel like that's a good thing.
I think it would be great if everyone knew it was there, and even, regular clients who are really experienced, because we write about some pretty advanced shit as well, like how not to fall in love with your sex worker and just blow the whole thing to kingdom come, which happens all the time.
Yeah.
We talk about stuff like that. How to, how to have a threesome if you've never had one before, like the stuff that is a bit more tricky. It would be really nice if people knew that there was a reliable resource for that stuff.
Fuck yeah. This is
It's
good.
not just like reading the sealed section of, Marie Claire or whatever.
Yeah, definitely.
Hmm.
So before we get out of here, do you got a story for the people? Can you leave the people on a story?
Oh, okay. I can tell you about the most embarrassing sex I've ever had, if you're down for that one, because I do like that story.
100% down. Let's hear it.
This is a story that I'm always embarrassed to share, but it's also very funny. So, I have a doubles partner that I really love. I'm pretty sure I can. She won't mind me naming her. Name is Alice Gray. She's great.
Shout
And
out.
we also had a client who wanted a threesome.
Okay.
And so the client booked both of us for this threesome. But Alice and I are both a little bit musically inclined. So we both love singing. And sometimes we post ourselves singing karaoke on Twitter, which is hilarious. She has a beautiful voice. I think she's classically trained. And this client loves music. So whenever I see him, whenever I saw him, he'd put together a playlist for each encounter, which was really cool.
Nice.
So he put together a playlist for this special threesome that we were going to have. I think it was his first threesome. And Alice and I turn up, and it's going really well. And then there's this point where we're both kind of on top of him and getting kind of sexy and making out. And then suddenly Nickelback comes on, and I'm really ashamed to admit this, but I really like Nickelback. I
Hey.
just do. I'm sorry. I do. And apparently Alice did too, because we both started singing. And so we're both just fucking this guy. And she's sitting on him and I'm sitting on his face and we're singing Nickelback. And then afterwards we were like, oh, that was probably a bit wrong.
That was amazing.
It's my favorite embarrassing sex story, but it is pretty bad. No one's disowned me yet for liking Nickelback, but yeah, I've gotten some looks.
I feel like when the sex is happening with an attractive person, the song, it's hard to take you out of that,
It was this vibe and it was a good song and we were totally vibing. It was great. Everyone was vibing. The way that me and Alice vibe is sometimes bursting into song together,
Do you remember what song it was?
Oh, I think it was probably the classic, how's it go? The classic one hit wonder Nickelback song,
How You
I've
Remind
been
Me?
wrong, I've been down.
Oh, yeah.
These words in my head saying, "Are we having fun yet?" Yeah, that one.
Oh my
I could give you a
God.
better rendition if it wasn't 8 in the morning.
That was so good. That was so fucking awesome.
We were so
You're
into it.
first person to sing Nickelback on the podcast, Georgie Wolfe.
Hopefully the
People.
last.
Hope the one and only time it's on the podcast.
I'm so glad I could distinguish myself.
So great. Georgie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This has been so much fun.
Thanks for having me. It's been a good chat.
Hell yeah. Where can the people find you? Where can they find your projects? Where can they find everything?
So I'm like all over the place. My website for escort clients is the Satisfaction Project, and that's satisfactionproject.com. I also have a book out about ethical hookups and online dating, and that's called The Art of the Hookup. You can get that on Amazon, or you can check out the website, which is artofthehookup.com. So that's less sex work and more just really good, solid sex skills and it's kind of like ethical pickup skills. If you're interested, I would love to hear from you on Twitter. So I am at Georgie Wolfe on Twitter. And then I also run a Twitter account for the Satisfaction Project, which is at All About Escorts. And yeah, love hearing from clients, love hearing experiences and stories because it helps me understand what you folks need to know. So please do get in touch, tag me on Twitter. That would be really cool.
Hell yeah. Thank you so much, Georgie. Oh my God. People, give her a follow. What are you doing? Thank you so much.
Yes. Come and check it out. And thanks heaps for chatting. Really nice to reconnect with you again. I feel like we always have good chats.
I know, right? Hell yeah. This is great. We'll be back, people. We'll see you later. Bye. I hope you enjoyed my conversation today with Georgie Wolfe. Shout out, Georgie. I appreciate you coming on the podcast. Such a good time. Always love chatting with you. Listener, she just plugged it. You can find her on Twitter at Georgie Wolfe. You can find the Satisfaction Project on Twitter at All About Escorts. Also, satisfactionproject.com. I have links to all of those in the show notes. Click the links, do the things. Give Georgie a follow, give the podcast a follow. And if you're a client, also check out the client survey. I have a link to that as well. That would help out so much. Hey, thanks for being here. This has been episode 107. Amazing. If you enjoy the show, follow us. We're everywhere. Subscribe at Full Service Pod. I'm at Tank Funkadelic. Do the things. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Super excited. I got an interview coming. Who's it going to be? I will not say. I'll probably tweet about it. And when I say I'm going to probably tweet about it, it's 50-50. I'm not really sure. But yo, thanks for being here. I have a link also in the show notes as well. I plugged it last week. One of my good friends, Rachel, has cancer. It's a GoFundMe, people. If you got some dollars, throw them dollars. That would warm my heart, make me feel good, people. So I got linked to that as well. And that's all she wrote. I hope you're good. Hope your Thanksgiving is wonderful. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Later. Full service.